Younger me, if I could sit you down right now, I'd tell you something that would change everything. But I know you wouldn't believe me. Not yet. Because right now you think you have it figured out. You think the life you've built will hold. That if you just keep going, if you just work hard enough, push long enough, prove yourself enough, everything will eventually settle into place. You think identity is something solid, but who you are today is simply who you are. But one day you will wake up and something will feel off. At first you won't be able to name it. It won't be a disaster. Nothing catastrophic will happen. But there will be a feeling, a quiet, persistent unease beneath the surface of everything. The life you built, the one you worked so hard for, will still be there. The career, the achievements, the relationships, the structure. But something about it will feel different. Like a suit that once fit perfectly, but now feels tight around the shoulders, restricting, unfamiliar, and you won't understand why. So, you will do what you have always done. You will push harder, set bigger goals, chase the next milestone, thinking that if you just achieve more, earn more, prove yourself more, the feeling will go away. But it won't, because this isn't something you can fix. It's something you must face. Younger me, I need you to listen very carefully now, because no one is going to warn you about this. You've spent your life building. You constructed an identity. You created a version of yourself that the world would accept, respect, admire. You made choices based on what was expected of you, what was practical, what was rewarded. You believed that if you built the right life, you would eventually feel whole. But one day, you will wake up and realize that the self you spent years creating is not the self you were meant to keep. This is where most people panic. They mistake it for a crisis. They think they have failed, that something is wrong with them, that they need to double down, correct course, work harder. But Jung understood what was happening. He knew that the first half of life is about construction, building an identity, establishing yourself, seeking security, and that's necessary. But he also knew something else, something far more important. At a certain point, that identity, the one you worked so hard to build, is meant to fall apart. Because the person you created to survive the first half of life is not the person you were meant to stay. And if you resist that change, if you try to hold on to the version of yourself that no longer fits, you will suffer. Not because you are broken, not because you made a mistake, but because you are being called to something greater. Younger me, I know how terrifying that sounds. I know what it feels like to watch the life you built start to feel unfamiliar, to feel like you are losing control, to question everything you once believed about success, about meaning, about who you are. And I also know that if you don't understand what is happening, you will waste years fighting it. You will do everything in your power to hold on to the career, the habits, the identity. You will cling to what is familiar even as it stops making sense. And you will wonder why none of it feels right anymore. But younger me, this unraveling, it is not the end, it is the beginning. And I've brought 6 people with me today. 6 minds who understood what most of us don't realize until it's too late. Carl Jung, who saw the collapse of the old self not as a crisis but as a transformation. Friedrich Nietzsche, who knew that to become something greater, you must first destroy what holds you back. Viktor Frankl, who proved that meaning is not something you find, it is something you choose. Alan Watts, who warned that the biggest mistake we make is believing life is a journey when it is actually a dance. Carl Rogers, who understood that real change comes not from fixing yourself, but from finally accepting who you are. And Seneca, who left behind the most important lesson of all: that time is not something we lose, but something we waste. They knew something, younger me. Something I wish I had known before everything began to fall apart. Because when you finally reach that moment, when the self you built begins to break down, you will face a choice. And the life you are meant for? It begins the moment you stop trying to hold on. Younger me, you've spent your whole life believing that if you work hard enough, if you build the right life, if you achieve enough, one day you'll finally feel complete. That's the promise they sell you, isn't it? That the right job, the right house, the right relationships will eventually bring you peace. That success will silence your doubts. That achievement will erase the fear that maybe, just maybe, you were never enough to begin with. Carl Jung spent his life asking one question: why do so many people feel lost at the peak of success? His answer was radical. The identity you spent decades crafting, the one that brought you stability, recognition, belonging, was never meant to last, or it was only ever the first act. For a while it will serve you. In fact, it has to. The first half of life is about building. You create an identity that fits the world. You learn who you need to be to survive, to belong, to be accepted. You play the role. You wear the mask. You build a life that makes sense. One that looks good from the outside. And for a time it works. Until one day it doesn't. It won't happen suddenly. It won't be dramatic. It will start with a quiet feeling, a whisper in the background of your thoughts. A sense that the life you built no longer quite fits. And that's the part no one warns you about. You spent so long believing that if you just climbed high enough, if you just proved yourself enough, if you just followed the script, you'd feel at peace. But suddenly you don't. You'll tell yourself it's just a phase. That you need a new challenge, a bigger goal, a change of scenery, and you'll double down, thinking that if you just push harder, the unease will go away. But it won't. Because this isn't a crisis, it's an initiation. Jung spent his life studying why people feel lost in midlife. He discovered something that explains why so many successful, intelligent, capable people suddenly find themselves questioning everything. He called it the two halves of life. The first half of life is about construction. It's about building the self, an identity that works in the world. You seek security, approval, success. You learn the rules and play the game. And you believe with every fiber of your being that if you do everything right, you will be rewarded with fulfillment. But the second half of life, it demands something entirely different. The first half is about building, the second half is about letting go. And this is where people struggle, because no one tells you that the self you spent decades creating was never meant to be permanent, that it was only ever a necessary first step. But younger me, this is the part I need you to hear. You're not breaking down, you're breaking open. The questions that frighten you, the uncertainty that unsettles you, they aren't problems, they are signs that something greater is trying to emerge. Some people feel this shift early, some later, and some never do. But for those who sense it, the message is clear. The life you've built is not enough. Not because it was wrong, but because it was incomplete. And this is where people make the mistake that costs them years. Some panic and double down on the old path. They chase bigger goals, hoping success will quiet the unease. They tell themselves that if they just keep going, the doubt will fade. Others abandon everything. They tear down their life overnight, thinking that reinvention will solve the problem. They search desperately for an answer they can't quite name. But Jung would tell you, neither of these paths lead where you need to go. The second half of life is not about chasing. It is about integrating. It is about becoming whole. And that starts with a single, terrifying act: honesty. You must stop filtering your thoughts to be acceptable. Stop ignoring what unsettles you. Stop explaining away the feeling that something is missing. You must notice what triggers you in others, because those are often the parts of yourself you have buried. You must sit with the thoughts you avoid. Write them down. Say them out loud. Face them. Question them. Understand them. And slowly you will start to feel whole. Jung called this process individuation. The journey of becoming who you truly are, instead of who you were told to be. And it is not easy, because to accept yourself fully, you must face the parts of you that you don't like. And if you don't, if you ignore the shift and pretend everything is fine, that's when your shadow takes over. The shadow is the part of yourself you hide. The anger you suppress, the desires you deny, the emotions you buried because they felt too dangerous to bring into the light. And if you don't face it, it will rule you from the dark. It will twist your desires into addiction, turn your unspoken fears into bitterness at the world, make you resent others for the very things you refuse to see in yourself. This is why so many people in midlife feel lost, bitter, or restless. They are fighting an enemy that is inside them. But here's the secret Jung wanted you to know. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your missing half. Everything you've buried. The doubts, the ambition, the sadness, the rage. It didn't disappear. It's waiting for you. And if you have the courage to turn toward it instead of running away, you will find that everything you've been looking for was hidden there all along. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, but it is also the most liberating, because the moment you stop fighting yourself, you realize you were never broken. You were simply unfinished. And now, at last, you have the chance to become whole." Younger me, I know you're afraid of change, afraid of letting go, and afraid that if you stop being who you've always been, you'll have nothing left. You've built your life carefully, piece by piece. You've worked to be someone respectable, someone accomplished, someone who others recognize. And yet, despite all that, deep down you sense something isn't right. You tell yourself it's just a phase, that you'll shake it off, that if you just keep moving forward, it'll pass. But it won't. Because this feeling, it isn't a mistake. It's a warning. Nietzsche believed that growth is an act of rebellion. The self you are today is not your final form. But here's the catch. Transformation is not about waiting for change to come. It's about tearing down the parts of yourself that no longer serve you and rebuilding again and again until what remains is unshakable. The idea that the person you are today is not the final version of you, that you were never meant to stay the same, that your job is not to protect the identity you've built, but to break it apart and rebuild it, over and over again, until what remains is something unshakable. But here's the part no one wants to hear. Growth is violent, but transformation does not come gently. It does not arrive as a moment of clarity under soft candlelight. Real transformation destroys you first. It burns away the things that are small, the things that are weak, the things that keep you caged. This is why so many people stay trapped. Because when they feel the destruction coming, the unraveling of who they were, they panic. They try to hold on. They cling to their old selves, mistaking comfort for peace. But Nietzsche knew the only way forward is through. You must be willing to destroy who you were to make space for who you are meant to become. That doesn't mean throwing everything away. It doesn't mean erasing your past. It means looking at yourself, every habit, every belief, every assumption of what, and asking, does this serve who I am becoming? Or is it just something I'm afraid to let go of? Maybe, younger me, you spent years chasing achievements, thinking that if you just accomplish enough, you'll finally feel worthy. But Nietzsche would ask you, what if the person chasing those achievements was never really you? Maybe you've built a life that looks good from the outside, but doesn't feel right on the inside. But Nietzsche would ask, what if the reason it doesn't feel right is because you've outgrown it? Maybe you've spent years avoiding risks, avoiding failure, staying safe. But Nietzsche would ask, what if playing it safe has only kept you small? You have to be willing to tear down the parts of yourself that no longer serve you. And that, younger me, is terrifying. Because for years you have mistaken that old self for your foundation. But the truth is, it was only scaffolding. And at some point, if you want to build something real, you have to be willing to knock it down. The world tells you that if you've built something stable, you should hold on to it. That if you've made it this far, you shouldn't risk losing it. That the person you are today is the person you are meant to stay. But that is a lie. Nietzsche believed that the greatest people in history were not those who played it safe, but those who dared to die to their old selves and rise again stronger. He called this becoming the Übermensch, the higher self. Not a person who is perfect or flawless or untouchable, but a person who has stopped waiting for permission. A person who has stopped looking to others to tell them who they should be. A person who has let go of who they were yesterday to make room for who they must become tomorrow. But how do you do it? How do you let go of the old self when it is all you've ever known? First, you must be willing to sit in the discomfort. Change is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront the possibility that you were wrong. Wrong about what mattered. Wrong about who you thought you were. Wrong about what you believed you wanted. But Nietzsche would remind you, being wrong is not the problem. Clinging to an old truth when you've outgrown it is. Second, you must learn to see destruction as creation. Most people fear change because they only see what is being lost. But Nietzsche understood that the fire that burns the old self away is the same fire that forges the new self. The pain of letting go is not the pain of loss. It is the pain of transformation. And third, you must be willing to walk alone. Because when you begin to change, people will resist it. They will try to pull you back to who you were. They will ask why you can't just be the person they knew. But Nietzsche would tell you that is not your concern. Your task is not to be who they need you to be. Your task is to become who you were meant to be. Younger me, I need you to understand this. The fact that you are questioning who you are is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of growth. The fact that you feel lost is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something new is trying to emerge. If you feel like your old self is crumbling, don't fight it. Let it. This is not the end. This is the fire that will forge you. Because the greatest version of you, the one who is free, the one who is alive, the one who is unbreakable, is waiting on the other side. But first you must be willing to burn. Younger me, I know you're searching. You wouldn't call it that, not yet. You'd say you're building something. Your career, your future, your life. You'd say you're working hard so that one day you can finally enjoy what you've earned. But deep down, there's a quiet fear you haven't put into words. What if, after everything, you still feel empty? Viktor Frankl had everything taken from him. His family, his home, his freedom. But in the darkness of a Nazi concentration camp, he uncovered a truth that would change the way we understand the human experience. Meaning is not something given to you. It is something you choose. And that choice, it is what determines whether you survive. For years, you have believed that happiness is something you achieve. That if you work hard enough, earn enough, succeed enough, one day you will have arrived. And for a while, it feels like you're getting closer. The promotions, the recognition, the milestone, they bring a rush, a sense of accomplishment to us. But the feeling never lasts, does it? No matter how much you achieve, there's always something missing. That is because happiness is not something you can chase. It is something that happens when your life is aligned with meaning. Frankl learned this in the worst place imaginable. A Nazi concentration camp. Stripped of everything. His family, his career, his freedom. And yet in the middle of that horror, he made a discovery that would change how we understand the human experience. He noticed something. The people who survived, who endured the unimaginable, weren't necessarily the strongest or the smartest or the fittest. They were the ones who had found something to live for, a reason to wake up each morning. Meaning, not pleasure, not comfort, not happiness. Because here's the truth, younger me, a life without meaning will always feel empty, no matter how much you try to fill it. This is why midlife feels hollow for so many people. Not because something is wrong with them, but because the things that once gave their life meaning have faded. The job that once felt like an exciting challenge now feels like routine. The ambitions that once kept them going now feel exhausting. The goals they spent years chasing now feel pointless, but this is where most people panic. They think, maybe I need to work harder, at least maybe I need to achieve more. Maybe I just haven't reached the right goal yet. But Frankl knew that the ones who spend their lives chasing happiness never find it. Because happiness is not a goal. It is a byproduct. And the thing that creates it is meaning. So what do you do when life feels meaningless? How do you create meaning when you feel lost? Frankl discovered that meaning comes in three ways. Through work, not just a job but a purpose, something that contributes to the world, something that outlives you. Through love, not just romantic love, the kind of love that makes life rich, deep friendships, kindness, shared experiences, the people who make you feel seen. Because younger me, if you have no one in your life who truly knows you, you're not really living yet. And through suffering. This is the hardest to understand, but it is the most powerful. When pain enters your life, and it will, you have a choice. You can let it break you, or you can use it. Some of the most purpose-driven people in the world, the ones who seem unshakable, the ones who inspire others, they didn't have easy lives. They had suffering. But instead of letting it define them, they turned it into something greater. Frankl himself said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." That is what meaning is, younger me. It is not something you find, it is something you create. And if you ever feel like life has lost its meaning, look at these three things. And what are you creating? Who are you loving? What suffering are you transforming? Because the moment you answer those, you will never feel lost again. Younger me, I know how hard you're trying. You wake up every day with a plan, a to-do list, a strategy. You measure your progress, set your goals, map out the next step, convinced that if you just keep pushing forward, one day everything will come together. You tell yourself that when you finally arrive, when you have the right job, the right house, the right life, then you'll be happy. Alan Watts saw something that most people never realize, not until it's too late. The greatest lie we've been told is that life is a journey, that it has a destination. We are taught from childhood that life moves in a straight line, that if we just follow the right step, study hard, build a career, start a family, accumulate success, one day we'll reach a moment when everything finally makes sense, when we feel complete. But Watts knew this was an illusion. He saw that people spend their entire lives chasing a future that never truly arrives. Always striving, always waiting, always believing that fulfillment is just one more milestone away. And in doing so, they miss the only thing that is ever real, the present. Younger me, Watts wasn't just a philosopher. He was a man who dedicated his life to exposing the hidden assumptions that keep people trapped in a cycle of endless striving. He understood that the greatest mistake we make is treating life like a task to be completed instead of an experience to be lived. And when you finally understand what he saw, the way you move through the world will never be the same again. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Every time you reach the next goal and the next milestone, the next success, it will feel good for a moment. But then the feeling fades. And so you set another goal, thinking this will be the one. This will finally make you feel whole. But it never does it? That's because you've been living as if life is a journey, one with a final destination where everything will finally make sense. But Watts saw something different. He saw that life is not a journey at all. Life is a dance. A dance has no finish line, no place where you are meant to arrive. The purpose of dancing is never to reach the end. It is to move, to feel, to experience every step along the way. And yet, younger me, you've been treating life as if it is something you must master, as if every moment is just another step toward the next. You've been racing toward a future that does not exist. And the reason you feel restless, younger me, the reason you feel like no matter how much you achieve, it's never enough, is because you are still chasing a future that does not exist. No one ever told you to stop. No one ever told you that you were already here. From the time you were a child, you were told, just do well in school, then just get a good job, but then just settle down, then just retire. At what point, younger me, did anyone ever tell you to simply be? This is why so many people, after achieving everything they were supposed to, still feel empty, because they were never taught how to live. only how to prepare for the next stage. You are not here to get somewhere. You are here to be here. But, younger me, I know what you're thinking. If life isn't about progress, then what's the point? If I stop striving, won't I just fall behind? Watts would tell you, you cannot fall behind in a dance. A journey has an end goal, a place you're trying to reach. But a dance, you don't dance to get somewhere. You dance because the movement itself is the point. This is what no one teaches you. That the purpose of life is not to arrive somewhere. It is to fully experience where you already are. But here's the problem. You have spent your whole life believing that control is the answer. That if you just plan enough, work enough, prepare enough, you can predict what will happen next. And Watts would warn you, that is an illusion. Because no matter how much you plan, no matter how much you fight for certainty, life will unfold in ways you cannot expect. And if you spend your life trying to control what happens next, you will never be fully alive where you are now. So what do? How do you stop chasing a future that doesn't exist? First, younger me, you must stop treating life as a means to an end. Do something today, not because it will get you somewhere, but because you love it now. Second, let go of the illusion of control. You do not control life. You do not control time. The only thing you control is how present you are in this moment. And third, stop waiting. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for the right conditions. Stop waiting for the moment when you finally feel ready to start living. Because Watts would tell you, you are already living. Younger me, you have spent years looking ahead, searching for a future moment when life will finally feel whole. But Watts would ask you, what if nothing is missing? What if you have been whole all along? What if, instead of searching for something more, you simply allowed yourself to be here and now? Because the life you are waiting for is already happening. Younger me, I know you've spent years trying to be the right kind of person, the kind who fits in, the kind who is liked, the kind who never makes people uncomfortable. And for a long time you convinced yourself that this was who you really were. But let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt truly free? Because Carl Rogers spent his life studying what makes a life feel real. And he discovered something that most people never realize. Something that explains why so many people wake up one day and don't recognize themselves anymore. The further you stray from your true self, the more lost you become. And that is what's happening to you, younger me. You keep waiting for something to click. You keep thinking that maybe, if you just work harder, achieve more, prove yourself enough, you'll finally feel whole. But you won't. Because the problem isn't that you haven't done enough. The problem is that you aren't being yourself. Rogers called it congruence. When the person you are on the inside finally matches the life you live on the outside. And here's the truth, younger me. That is the only way you will ever feel free. But what if you don't know who you really are? What if you've spent so long being what others expect that you've lost touch with yourself? Rogers had an answer for that too. The first step is to stop censoring yourself. Pay attention to the moments when you adjust your words, your tone, your opinions just to fit in. Ask yourself, if I wasn't afraid of judgment, what would I say? The second step is to notice what excites you. The things that pull at you, even if they don't make sense. The interests you dismiss, the parts of yourself you keep in the dark. That is your real self trying to get your attention. And the third step, radical self-acceptance. Because real change, the kind that lasts, never comes from fixing yourself in arson. It comes from accepting yourself so fully that the things that aren't meant for you start falling away. One day, younger me, you will reach a point where pretending is exhausting, where saying yes to things you don't want, showing up in places you don't belong, and living a life that doesn't fit becomes unbearable. And when that day comes, I hope you remember what Rogers said. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. Younger me, you've been waiting for permission to be yourself. But you don't need permission, you only need courage. Because the moment you stop pretending is the moment you start living. Younger me, there is something you believe that is more dangerous than any mistake you will ever make, more deceptive than any failure you will ever fear. You think you have time. You tell yourself that there's always tomorrow, that one day you'll finally slow down, that one day you'll start living the way you always wanted. But there was a man who saw through this illusion thousands of years ago, a man who watched the wealthiest, most powerful people in Rome waste their lives believing exactly what you believe now. His name was Seneca, a philosopher, a statesman, an advisor to emperors, but more importantly, a man who understood the one truth that most people never learn until it's too late. He saw people chasing success, chasing power, chasing everything except the one thing that truly mattered, their time. He watched men build empires, hoard fortunes, conquer nations, only to reach the end of their lives and realize they had spent everything except their days wisely. And he left behind a warning, one that should shake you awake. Seneca would tell you that is the greatest lie you will ever believe. You don't have time, not in the way you think. You see, most people don't realize this until it's too late. Life is not short, but we make it short. We waste years on things that don't matter. We live as if time is an endless resource, as if we can spend it carelessly and still have enough left for the things that truly count. We tell ourselves that we'll enjoy life later, when things settle down, when we have more money, when we have more freedom. But Seneca warned, you act like mortals in what you fear and like immortals in what you desire. You fear death as if it could happen at any moment, but you waste your days as if you were going to live forever. Younger me, you don't have forever. And that is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to wake you up. Because the real tragedy is not that life ends. The real tragedy is that most people never truly live. You see, people misunderstand what wasting time really means. They think wasting time is doing nothing, sitting still, resting, relaxing. But that's not what Seneca meant. You don't waste time by doing nothing. You waste it by doing the wrong things, by spending years chasing approval instead of meaning, by living for other people's expectations instead of your own, by filling your days with distractions, obligations, and noise, while neglecting the things that actually make life worth living. And one day, younger me, if you are not careful, you will wake up and realize that you traded your time for things that never really mattered. So what do? How do you stop wasting the only life you have there? First, you must stop postponing your life. Stop telling yourself that you'll do the things that matter later. Later is not promised. Second, you must ask yourself one simple question. If today were your last, would you be satisfied with how you spent it? Because the truth, younger me, is that one day you will wake up and it will be your last. And on that day you will not wish you had spent more time at the office. You will not wish you had made more money. You will not wish you had impressed more people. You will wish for more moments with the ones you love. You will wish for more days spent doing the things that made you feel alive. You will wish for one more chance to live fully instead of merely existing. But by then it will be too late. Younger me, the life you are waiting for is already happening, and the time to start living it is now. Because the only day that ever truly belongs to you is this one. We've explored 6 of the greatest minds, Jung, Nietzsche, Frankl, Watts, Rogers, and Seneca. But now I want to hear from you. Which one of them spoke to you the most? Which idea hit you in a way you weren't expecting? Was it Jung's insight about the self you must let go of? Nietzsche's challenge to destroy and rebuild? Frankl's revelation that meaning is something you choose? Or perhaps it was Watts' reminder that life is not a journey but a dance? Maybe it was Rogers' call for radical self-acceptance, or Seneca's warning that we waste the very time we fear losing. Tell me in the comments, which of these thinkers changed the way you see your own life? And more importantly, why? And one more thing. There are countless minds throughout history who have wrestled with these same questions. Questions of meaning, identity, transformation, and time. Who should we explore next? What other thinkers, philosophers, or psychologists have shaped the way you see the world? Drop their names in the comments, because this journey of understanding doesn't end here. And the next great conversation might start with you.